In 1985, Anthony Ray Hinton was arrested and charged with 2 counts of capital murder in Alabama. Shocked and confused, 29-year-old Hinton knew that he was innocent and that it had to be a case of mistaken identity. Naively, he believed that truth and proof and a confirmed alibi would set him free. But with no money and a lack of quality representation, Hinton was sentenced to death by electrocution. He spent his first 3 years on death row at Holman State Prison in complete silence. But as Hinton realized and accepted his fate, he resolved to not only survive, but find a way to live and grow on death row. For the next 27 years, he was a beam of light, transforming not only his own spirit, but those of his fellow prisoners, 54 of whom were executed mere feet from his cell. With the help of civil rights attorney Brian Stevenson, Hinton won his freedom in 2015. On April 3rd, 2015, Hinton was released from the prison after the judge overturned his conviction and the state of Alabama dropped all charges against him. When Hinton stepped outside as a free man for the first time in 30 years, he looked up at the sky, breathed a sigh of relief, and uttered the words, "The sun does shine." A man who had been unjustly arrested and locked up on death row for 30 years somehow was able to find light and positivity in complete and utter darkness. He should be an inspiration to us all, a beacon of hope that we too can find light in our darkness. On this Rosh Hashanah Eve, 5782, I would like to explore areas of darkness in our lives. When we lose a loved one, when we battle illness, and when we feel the sting of a setback. And then I would like to explore how we accept our realities and begin the search for light again. While I do not claim to know the reasons we must go through dark moments or why some people have more darkness in their lives than others, I do know that the choice of how to react is within our hands and our hands alone. Each of us in this room has suffered loss and the accompanying feelings of pain and sadness. Whether it was the loss of a parent, a grandparent, a spouse, a sibling, or God forbid, a child or grandchild, the loss of any life is tragic. The pandemic has increased the amount of death surrounding us and magnified our communal sense of grief. It is a heavy weight we carry, and we all have done our share of mourning. While Judaism prescribes for us a clear path and guide for healing our hearts after loss, from Shiva to Shloshim to Yartzeit, it is up to us to choose to enter the journey and find light again. We enter the darkness when our loved one dies, but we find light again when we accept our reality and make the choice to go on living. In 2011, Madonna Badger, a woman from Stamford, Connecticut, suffered an inexplicable loss when her entire family, 3 children, and her parents were all killed in a tragic house fire. After everyone had gone to bed, Madonna was up late reading in her room when she smelled smoke. She was able to escape from her window and climb up to the 3rd floor where her daughters were sleeping. However, the fire was too strong and she could not enter the room to rescue them. In a matter of minutes, her entire home was enveloped in raging flames, and she lost everyone that mattered to her. Her daughters, Lily, Sarah, and Grace, and parents, Lomar and Pauline. Following the fire, Madonna entered into the depths of depression and eventually was hospitalized for suicidal thoughts. However, she quickly came to a realization. When in her darkest moments, when she yearned to feel the presence of her daughters and parents, she was blocked. She could not connect with them. She could not feel them. However, when she stepped out of her darkness and resumed life among the living, laughing, celebrating, enjoying life, enjoying her friends, she suddenly felt her daughters within her. sharing her happiness and giving her the strength she needed to go on living. She said, "My 3 children died that night. My parents also died, and I lived. I am still their mother, and I am still their daughter. I lost everything, but I didn't lose my mind, no matter how many times I wished I had." Madonna eventually returned to work, where she dedicates her time and energy to fighting for women's rights in honor of her 3 daughters. She lives because they cannot, and she honors their memory every day when she betters the world for future generations of women. Madonna Badger returned to the living to teach us an important lesson about grief, a lesson that life does not only go on, but that truly living life after the death of a loved one can be meaningful and spiritually enriching. Professor Hancock of BYU wrote in an article about grief, "The trick is to follow the light we have. No matter how dark it is, retreating farther into the darkness makes little sense. Indeed, we need to seek the light wherever we can find it. While we sometimes fear moving on because it feels like a betrayal of our loved ones, if we think of it rather as honoring them, perhaps it's easier to do." My dear friend Lauren Muscarella lost her mother while we were in college. After many difficult years, Lauren decided to honor her mother's memory by bringing light to other mourners. She wrote a book and started a foundation, both of which aim to bring healing and light into the lives of grievers. Lauren's foundation holds an annual event in which she asks people to write one thing they wish to accomplish during the year in honor to honor their lost loved one. In committing to living life, to going on a much anticipated vacation, to facing a fear, to volunteering time and energy, mourners slowly return to life and once again can find light. While all of this is easier said than done, let us draw comfort in knowing that light is possible. Light is there and it is reachable if we choose to engage it. Another area of darkness in which we have all experienced, whether on a small or large scale, is physical illness. A diagnosis that is painful to hear, a long battle ahead, agonizing pain, stress, and above all, fear. Those who have beaten their illnesses and those who are currently in the trenches know that it is a dark place to be. Whether battling COVID-19, struggling through cancer, or dealing with chronic illness, the experience is brutal and can weaken even the strongest among us. So how does one begin to find light in the darkness of illness? How do we keep going when fear and pain clouds our minds and bodies? In Pirkei Avot, the rabbis of old ask the following question: who is rich? They answer saying, those who rejoice in their own portion. But what does this have to do with illness? The rabbis teach us that in order to feel rich, healthy, and above all, lucky, we must focus on what we have, not what we are lacking. Rather than focusing on the pain we are feeling and the fears we are currently experiencing, instead, let us focus on what we have. The friends and families surrounding us, the health of our minds, the healing hands of the doctors and nurses aiding us, the good days. While we must first accept the reality of our situation and mourn the loss of our health, when we are able to begin moving out of the darkness, gratitude just may be the way. In January 2021, my father, Rabbi Brad Boxman, received a positive COVID-19 test. The dreaded PCR result came just days after his first vaccination. He quickly grew ill, and after a long and hard decision, my mother drove him to the emergency room for critical care she could no longer provide. She kissed my father goodbye at the doors of the hospital and prayed she would see him again alive and recovered. My father suffered 7 days in the hospital and feared he would not survive this brutal virus. But then he took a turn for the better. With the healing hands of the doctors, incredible and powerful medications, and above all, a determined, positive spirit, my father pulled through. When the fog of the illness began to dissipate, the first thing my father did was make a list of all he was grateful for and all he learned in this life-altering experience. He vowed to live a different, more meaningful life, where moments are cherished and marked, and days are lived fully and lovingly. Even though it was a long journey to full recovery, my father was able to find his light within and a strength to return to the living more resilient than before. In our Shabbat prayer book, Mishkan Tefillah, we are reminded of how gratitude aids us in finding light in dark moments. We read every week, God of goodness, we give thanks for the gift of life, wonder beyond words, for the awareness of soul, our light within, and so on. I never stopped to really think about it until now, but we always have light, even in the darkness, because it dwells within us. Our soul is always intact, even when we are physically ill, and it is our soul, our sweet neshama, that we must tap into to find light in the midst of illness and pain. In Japan, broken objects like clay pots are often repaired with gold. Rather than being discarded and forgotten, the cracks are filled with gold and made to look even more beautiful than before. The flaw is seen as a unique piece of the object's history, which adds to its beauty. This beautiful tradition works for us humans as well. When we feel broken and physically flawed, let us fill our cracks with gold. Let us fill our souls with gratitude and let our light warm us from the inside out. The final area of darkness I would like to explore this evening is probably the most common and recurring among all of us. It is the darkness we feel when things don't turn out how we expected them to, when we feel defeated, deflated, and discouraged. It is the darkness that comes from divorce, from a miscarriage, from the loss of a job, from that dreaded rejection letter from college, from failed tests, failed relationships, and poor choices. It is the moment we feel like climbing into a cave and never coming out. We have all been here in one capacity or another, and we know how crippling it can be. However, we also know that if we stay in that place for too long, we get stuck. So how do we find the strength to climb out and start anew, to move forward and find our light again? First, we must accept our reality and grieve appropriately. Something happened and we are hurting. It cannot be ignored. However, afterward, the focus must be on the future, on the strength and wisdom gained from the experience. While we cannot change the past or our physical situation, we can rise above it. Let us then face the situation, look it straight in the eyes, and let it know that it can't defeat us. While our strength may have been tested through this ruthless, challenging experience, we are still alive. We survived the challenge and are here to tell about it. A story is told about a combat pilot in Vietnam. The pilot was radioed to a secret mission, which required him to fly in total darkness, totally by instruments. Hovering above a jungle under heavy cloud cover, the darkness was overwhelming. He radioed to his man on the ground and said, "What can you give me?" The guy had not even a flashlight. The landing had to be so precise in a small postage stamp in the middle of the jungle that an error of 5 feet could crash the chopper and kill them all. Finally, the man on the ground said, "I have a Zippo." The pilot said, "Light it and hold it up." So in the middle of the jungles of Southeast Asia, on a top secret warfare mission, a combat chopper pilot landed by the flame of a tiny lighter that pierced the darkness. Even when we, like the pilot, only have the light of a Zippo in a huge, dark forest, let us remember that is enough to light the way. Through acceptance, determination, and perseverance, we too can find our light again and stumble our way into a brand new day where the sun does shine. Shana Tova.